see it connect, you can. So it'll be a point where you'll start seeing the feed, and then you
Yeah,
can hit go live.
then go live.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm seeing that. So
I'm
I'm
not
there.
seeing it yet, so but you can. I think it's fine. I think you can do it.
Yeah, for me, it's coming up.
Okay,
It's a little
great.
delayed, but I'll just
Yeah,
be looking at
that's
it on
okay.
Restream.
There we go.
Okay,
I'm wondering how this sound is.
talk.
Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing.
Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing, testing. I think it's good.
Okay, cool. All right. So we did it, I think. We did it.
We finally made this happen.
Yeah.
This has been a thing that we've been racking our minds. Mostly, I feel like me trying to figure out what equipment to get because you just are all all ideas. I feel like, and not
Long
looking
time
into.
request of
Yeah,
a mic setup for us.
yeah. So
I'm gonna move this down just a smidge. Okay.
yeah.
I'm like making sure that I don't break this mic.
Hmm.
Okay, cool. Welcome back to Not Your Mommy's Advice podcast, the live recording, friends and community members.
Yeah,
So happy to have you with us today, tonight.
and people that follow me, you can finally see it live as well.
I
So
know,
at
isn't
least
that
now you know. Now
exciting?
you know that your boy has a podcast. If you didn't know that,
We're
uh,
out here.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So my name's Claudia,
And I'm Ariel.
and this is Not Your Mommy's Advice podcast, episode 20.
20, trying to get it again. I repeat every week. I feel like to just get it more consistent, but we're trying and we're trying to make it look better. I think we're trying to get better as we do it.
I know, we're trying to improve for y'all, really. Like, really.
We're even talking about going to a studio
Oh,
and
I
doing
know. We
this.
might record in a professional studio, which is going to be so cute.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that to see. We'll let you all know when that happens. But
Also, for folks, I want to hear from you all too. Like, if you're tuning in for the first time or if you're a loyal listener, shout out to our loyal listeners and our new listeners. I want to know what topics you want us to cover, all things relationship, love, first gen, and six, the six. So, and
okay,
dating
why'd you say it that way?
because I'm a weirdo.
Yeah. Well, let's hop into it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Can you allow me to share my screen so that
Yeah.
folks you can finally see this wheel that I've been working
We've
with?
been talking about this wheel for months, and now you can finally see it.
Okay. So
Look at the beautiful work that y'all did. Great
you
job, babe.
know, a lot of thought goes into this sometimes. Oh, we were just talking about this. Oh. Understanding sexual desire discrepancy.
Oh, okay, interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You have any initial thoughts?
No, but I can do a somatic check-in.
Okay. You could take it. You could take it off
Yeah,
the.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Um, no, I feel like a little nervous to talk about it. Like my mom recently was like, "I saw your podcast." I'm like, "Hey, mom, if you're watching this and you don't want to hear me talk about sex, go ahead and turn off the episode now."
Well, lucky for you, my mom doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But I think other than that, I mean, we've kind of touched on this topic in the past, but I feel like, you know, discrepancy, I don't know, it's definitely not something that I ever learned about, I ever grew up exposed to, just like this idea of having different sex drives is just completely novel to me. Like it feels so new. Um, and so, I mean, even in like more recent years in conversations, like I feel like it's very much just like, yeah, like, like just do it. Just like, just have sex. Like, look how hot your man is. Like, come on. Don't you want him? And I'm like, well, duh. Obviously, I love you. But it's like, it almost makes, I think the thought is like, okay, if I don't want to have sex with you all the time, um, like every single day, every minute, then okay, I'm exaggerating. Then there's like something wrong with me. And so I feel like that's the kind of like thought that comes up. There's not like nuance or room to think about it as like, oh, maybe we're just like wired differently. And then there's
Yeah.
like a whole other like attachment relationship dynamic thing under there too, I'm sure. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
My initial thoughts, I think, I mean, I
Oh, wait,
appreciate
shout out to
the
Victoria, she just joined.
hi, Victoria.
Hello, Victoria.
Welcome.
We love you.
Uh-huh. Thank you for listening to our podcast and letting us know you listen to it. Um, I think when I think about this discrepancy in sex, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say, "Oh, I feel like there's something wrong with me," because I think on at least my experience has been that that is also where I go, that there is something wrong
Mm,
with me. And I feel like a big part of this topic, I think, goes with not having so many conversations about it. I think about sexual health, just having sex, talking about sex, what it means, how to engage in it. And there's a lot of assumptions with sex that I think happens in relationships. And I know that and I'm still working through it really about how to like, and I think we're still figuring it out, like, right, of like our own discrepancies, right? Like I sometimes feel like I want to have sex all the time, like, not all the time, but like a
higher
higher
sex
like
drive.
a higher sex drive,
Mhm,
and then that may not be your own experience. Like that is not your experience. That has not been my experience of you, right? So like there's been some like hitting a block there, hitting a wall, right? And within that wall, I feel like my experience has been I hit this wall, and after hitting this wall so many times, I start to then go inward of like, well, there must be something wrong with me. You don't
mhm,
find me attractive. I don't get you turned on.
mhm,
I need to maybe she wants to go find it somewhere else, right? Like, or maybe do I need to go find it somewhere else?
mhm.
Like, do I need to start having this conversation about
Yeah.
having sex with other people?
Mhm,
Like, and then like that feels really scary too to have
mhm.
that conversation of like,
Totally.
what if what if the answer is for me to just go and have sex with just random people and
Okay.
to just have like
Just random randos?
to just
Okay.
like fulfill that
To fulfill that
to
need. I mean,
fulfill that need.
I think it's a valid question. I think, like, what I'm really hearing in this is, like, ultimately, okay, we have different sex drives, right? Like, and then we have, like, an internal narrative about it. So, there's a thing that is happening factually. Like, we've observed that you wanna have sex more often or more frequent than I do, seemingly. So, then there's a narrative that you tell yourself, and then there's a narrative that I tell myself about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is just like, and then there's, like, all this meaning that's being made, in my head and then in your head, and if we never talk about it, then it's like all these assumptions come. I feel like this is, like, what happens in, like, maybe, like, old school marriages or whatever. I'll just say that to say, like, we just don't talk about it, and then there's, like, all these assumptions and, like, resentment that's happening, and then, like, I think that's when you cheat. Honestly, like, to me, I think that's what ends up happening 'cause it's like, "Well, I'm not getting it here, and these are all the reasons, so this is never gonna happen for me, so I'm just gonna, like, go somewhere else to find it." Because it just leads to a whole lot of dissatisfaction. Anyway, I'm gonna, like, pull back. Oh, Hatala Caleb said, "The male fantasy random people." What's up, Hatala Caleb? Is that the male fantasy? Hooking up with random people?
I I mean, I think like when you're younger, like for me, I feel like a part of that is like brought in, where like I'm thinking about like media being really heavy on the male psyche and like what we're supposed to be after. Like, and it's making me now think, Caleb, about like outings that I used to have with my friends when I was in college, and like them talking about like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna try to hook up with so and so, blah 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 blah, and that always kind of just being around, like in the air. And I don't know if that's the
Mhm.
experience for all males. I don't want to just blanket it as that, but I do think that at a larger like social like psyche, I think that
Like, culturally or, like
there
mhm.
is some aspect there of men being almost like not almost say stereotyped, but almost being pigeonholed really into
Like, you're
you
supposed to want that.
you're supposed to want that. You're
Mhm.
supposed to be this like sexual being. And I always hear men like on social media, I think like justify that type of behavior and to say like, we're just sexual beings and blah 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 blah. And, like, I think a part of it like, a part of it is true, you know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
and,
Like
and monogamy is, like, not
yeah,
natural,
so shit
and
like that, you know what I'm saying? Like, where dudes
Hi,
justify
Shaita.
their own, like, shitty behavior with,
With
like
just, like, "This is how we're hardwired."
yeah, we're just hardwired to, like, have sex, and we're just gonna go look for it anywhere, so, like,
Yeah,
this
because we
woman
need
better treat me
it, and
yeah, this woman better treat me good, or Imma just go find someone like that. Like, that's cool, dude, but I think at the core of that, though, is, like, this lack of, like, also
"What's up, Francis experience?"
of, like, I think attuning to one's own experience as a at least for me as a man, like, what is sex? Was I talked about sex? And, like,
Mhm.
what is, like, the I don't know, I'm thinking about, like, what's the style of engaging in sex because that I know that was something that was not talked to me about at all. Like, my conversation about
Like,
sex
what is it? Initiating, you mean?
yeah, like
Yeah.
initiating. There's that couple, right? Like, what was the couple?
Xander and Vanessa.
Yeah, like they have a
Mhm.
whole and
There's
shout out
like,
to them. They're
they
not
have their
sponsoring
own
us.
podcast. They're not sponsoring us. They're also awesome, and I feel like I learned so much just from listening to that one episode about differences in sex drives.
Yeah, so like just engaging in sex, like no one talked to
Yeah,
me
like, how
about
do you
that.
initiate with your partner, and, like yeah, it feels like such a, um, like a closed experience sometimes where it's like, "What's up, micarios?" It feels like such a closed experience where it's like, well, as a woman, actually, um, like, a lot of my conditioning was just around, like, well, what does the man want? Like, give it to him, keep your husband happy. Well, first of all, hold on, let me backtrack. You don't have sex before marriage. I know
Yeah,
it's, like, as antiquated as it sounds, like, I feel like that message was for sure reinforced,
yeah.
or, like, be prudent, um,
And for me, it was
and
the opposite. Go have sex with everybody.
go ahead, yeah, right, right.
Yeah,
But then, like, when you do get married, you gotta make sure you keep them happy, you keep them satisfied, and my pleasure was never centered or talked about, right? So it's like, you know, and then I'm not saying that that was like my lived experience, but I felt like those were the messages that I got. So that question of like, what do I like was never really a thing that I ever really got to explore on multiple levels, but especially sexually because it was like shameful, it was taboo. So how the fuck am I supposed to know what I like if first of all no one's asking me and the men are like centering their own what going back to that idea of closed experience. It's like how do I get it? When I want it, how do I get it? Who can I get it from? Like how can I get off?
yeah,
So it's like where in that is my pleasure, my experience,
yeah.
like or initiating with me. It's like I'm not even there. I could be anybody.
Just another body.
I'm just another body, and that has honestly, like, I've had a lot of experience where it's just like, "Oh, you could be anybody." Not you, but the feeling was like, I could be anybody, you know?
Hmm.
Which is feels pretty shitty.
Yeah,
That's not how I feel with you. I'm just saying, like, in general.
yeah. I mean, I hope you don't feel that way with me.
No, no.
I mean, the idea of whether I like it, even as I'm hearing that cycle of like, who am I going to get it from? Blah 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 blah. Like, I don't even know if we check in if we like that. You know what I'm saying? And like, is there actually like a fulfilling part there of wanting to have sex with multiple people? I don't know if that actually is. I know that that wasn't for me. I remember having a one night stand with somebody,
Mhm.
and just like I had to get out of it. Like I actually like we were having
Oh,
sex, and like I mean I don't know if they were enjoying it. Right there, we were going through the motions. We were
you were
also
having your closed experience.
yeah, and then like in the middle of it, I just remember just like I'm just not feeling this.
Yeah.
Like I need to get out of this. And like I had to just fake it till I make it. And I'm like and then I was like,
That's so wild to
you need to
me.
go. Like, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like you need to go home. Please don't stay
We have a
here.
comment here from Caleb. Right. It's this unknown balance of men validating their sexual drive and women understanding that, but then like men don't want any responsibility in controlling their sex drives. Just chilling here. Oh yeah. Okay. So interesting. I mean, I feel like we can speak to this, but I think to also go back to your point, it's like maybe what you're saying is like, we don't even talk about like what our own desires are within our own relationship, you mean? Like what our
Hmm.
own sexual desires and fantasies are. And like maybe there is this idea of like maybe you do want to have multiple partners, but then also in your experience, that's not what you like. You don't really like to have casual sex, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think I learned that, what in that time period when I wasn't in a relationship. I think exploring with that because I consider myself so that to me is
Be
also
right
like,
back. I'm gonna get the charger.
oh, okay. There is an aspect there that's at least was confusing for me because I feel like for like a majority of my life, even now, like there is a high sex drive. So for me to have that encounter where I'm actually having sex with somebody and then to then realize that like, oh, this is actually not what I was actually looking for, it made me question about like what actually am I looking for in sex? And in that conversation I know was not really like at the helm of like what exactly is it that I'm looking for within sex. And then now I bring it to my partner, right? Like this not knowing what is it that I'm looking for. Um because it's I mean it's layered really about the the different like upbringings really that comes up, and then you meet with your partner, and at least in our experience like we did grow up differently in regards to sex and even to just different sexual like explorations. Like for me to feel like a highly sexually person and then to then have this experience where I'm not necessarily being met with that, like that was also hard. But can you remember what Caleb said? Because I feel like now I'm going on a
Yeah,
tangent.
Caleb said, I am back. I'm still troubleshooting this charger situation. It's this unknown balance of men validating their sexual drive and women understanding that, but then men don't want any responsibility controlling their sex drives.
Mm.
And it reminds me actually of the book Fixing Men.
Yeah,
Excuse
yeah.
me.
Sorry, we always reference like books in our
There's two
college.
academics in this household, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah, we're we're Latino studies majors, so we had a lot of that background, you know, context wise. But no, I mean I feel that Caleb about not taking responsibility, and like but I also would say that like I think as a society we also don't really take responsibility with the harm that is done with sex, and I don't really know if this actually goes with the
Well, they're saying
discrepancy
taking
with it.
responsibility of their sex drive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but, like, what I'm saying is what I'm getting at is, like, I don't even know if that totally is, like, what the like, if that is what actually leads to the discrepancy, if that makes any sense. Like, the
I think so. I think in a sense it's connected. I mean, to me, right? Like, because it almost goes like underground or unconscious. Like you don't have to like track these like yourself emotionally, physically. And that's never been expected or reinforced. Not of you specifically, but of men.
mm,
So it's like, oh, that's, the whole boys will be boys thing. Oh, that's just like men being men. That's just a man. He's not going to track himself. He's not going to be responsible for emotions. He's not going to be responsible for his sex drive. And you can't expect that of them. And I feel like that's definitely a message that I think gets reinforced implicitly in to you. And then also as a woman to me is like, yeah, just keep him satisfied. It's like these messages are kind of like the implicit of like what's
mm.
happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's a great
okay.
point. Welcome, Mariposa Language.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I think here in that context, I think it makes more sense about them potentially not having I think the awareness really
Mhm.
of like the impact that has on our partnerships, and especially when the discrepancies are different. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of keep harping back on this word discrepancy because I
Is that the word that you used?
no, that's the question, or that's what we're talking about, the
Oh,
discrepancies
yeah, yeah,
in
yeah, the
sexual
discrepancy
desires.
between
So
yeah.
like when I'm adding in this other layer of not taking responsibility for the shit that like wasn't really taught to me in regards to sexual desire, and then how that then leads to almost a really complicated story of sex within a partnership. At least I
Mhm.
feel like that's what has been my experience in our relationship.
I mean, I think it kinda speaks to, I mean, I don't know if this is what you're gonna say, but I think to me it speaks to, like, well, then you make like, if you're not talking to me about it because that was never told to you to do or to me. So no one said, talk to your partner about your sexual desires. No one asked what my sexual desires were. So I don't even know them. So then we don't talk about it. And then there's that internal narrative that we make about it. And then it's like, that's a problem because no one is communicating what's happening on the inside. Is that what you mean? Or were you going to say something else?
No, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think a lot of it is unsaid. So,
Mm
I mean, it makes sense for even us as like as you're hearing us, like as you're listening and you're having us hear like this like almost jumbled like pieces, like puzzle pieces. I think like that is this is kind of what it's like. Like it is this like uh this conversation that kind of goes in and out of sometimes even making sense. Like this whole thing sometimes at points doesn't totally make sense to me,
hmm. Mm hmm.
of
It's like
now.
when you're learning material, like new material for a first time. You're like,
Yeah, and like I think when I'm thinking about this concept, like there has to be like a willingness to learn. At least that's been my case
mm
of like to learn really of like to do take responsibility of my desires and try my best to try to listen to you as my partner to what is it that you need and to believe you like right when you're telling me certain things about sexual desire because I'm
hmm.
also like if as my own the way that I am I'm skeptical about everything.
Mm
So
hmm.
to for you to say like I don't want to have sex right now but I still find you attractive and you
Mm
still
hmm.
turn me
Mm
on
hmm.
and you still do this, like there is this like thing of for me of like I don't know if I believe you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
don't know
yeah.
if I really believe that. Like I have to then check myself about like having to believe my partner and then to then like I think almost talk to that young part of myself to
Mhm.
know that like this part of it is not something that I'm doing wrong, but it's a part of this like jumbled piece of like how do we then mix these sexual desires or the
Mhm.
the wanting to have sex? How do we then make this a dance that can
Mhm.
have us both fulfilled, as opposed to it just fulfilling me or even just fulfilling you?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a good question. Welcome, Humberto Gonzalez. So I mean, I'm thinking about that. And it's like, we have, I think, obviously needs that are trying to be met, and so I think where, like, for me, my growing edge is really understanding what is it that I like. Like when you're like, okay, so maybe it's not as frequent as you would like it to be, but also like part of it is like a genuine like desire for connection, desire to have sex. And I'm like, okay, obviously I don't want to never have sex because that is not the case either. So like hearing what Vanessa and Xander said in their podcast about like, oh, maybe it's just like a different way to access that drive. I'm like, oh, I never considered it that way. And so to like stay open and curious about, okay, so how does that like type of energy and connection with you get to be supported in me? I feel like that's where I go. And not all of that needs to be like processed and talked about and all of this stuff with you. But I feel like there's, I think, an important question that you pose to me, which is like, okay, cool. So, like, how can we do it? Or how can we be in relationship sexually where we're both satisfied? And I'm like, okay, yes, I want that too. So then, like, what do I need out here from these other areas of my life to feel resourced enough so I'm like can stay curious about it, one, and then two, like feel enough energy to be sexual, basically, at the
Mhm.
bottom line. Because like, young mom, working, entrepreneur, chronic health condition. And so most of the time I'm just like exhausted. And I think it would be easy. I think I'm saying all of that because I feel like it would be easy for me to like, well, I'm really justified in all the reasons why like I could just stay the same. But I also don't want that. Like I'm like, okay, there's obviously a reason why it's being presented in our relationship. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let me work this edge then. Because you also asked me to, like in a really loving and tender um way after, like we fumble through these conversations, but ultimately you're like, I do love you and I want to stay with you and I want to make this work long term. So like how how can we do that? Like, how can we imagine a way where we can work through this? Like, and maybe the answer's not gonna come tomorrow, but also, like, let's play with it. Like, in our imagination, but also, like, literally, physically. Like, let's play with these ideas. Like, what works?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, those conversations were hard, and I think that they're gonna continue being hard. I think I'm just thinking about the feeling about having conversations about, like, wanting to have more sex jumbled in with all of these other things that are very real, right? What you just said
Mhm.
of your life, and how to then still support, like, at least for me and my need of that, but then also to support you and your need of, like, wanting to do it, but then also having the again, kinda to regenerate this energy. So, it's it's definitely, like, a hard conversation, and I think, like, it's I feel like as we dive deeper into it, I feel like it's gotten I don't wanna say easier, but I catch myself, like, wanting to just reinforce, like, that there is still, like, a deep love that I have for you, and that, like, I want to work it with you, even at the expense of, like, me having to do a lot of work on myself. Like, this is, like, years of therapy, y'all, like, of
So many therapies.
for me, and, like, really trying to understand, like, what is happening for me because what would happen, which was what would happen, like, which I alluded to earlier, which is, like, wanting to have sex, you telling me no, and then building resentment from that,
Mhm,
right? Like,
mhm.
there was, like, a big, like, resentment built up, right? Because then it's like, "Well, fuck, dude, like, I wanna have sex. How come you don't wanna have sex? Like, what's
Yeah,
happening? Like, what's
mhm.
wrong?"
What's
You
wrong?
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
"What's wrong? Like, what's" you know? And, like, so then there's, like, a real, like, mixing of the gears that ends up happening there, and, like, so I had to dive deep into my own thing of, like, what is it that I need, and then how can I ask that of my partner? And that's changed, like, as we play around with different, like, ideas with how to get it done, and, like,
How to get it done.
yeah, you know, I mean, sex, but even just, like, having that conversation,
Mhm. Yeah.
because it also takes a lot of courage, at least in my opinion, if this is my own experience, it takes a lot of courage to bring up something that has been pent up in
Mhm.
regards to resentment,
Yeah.
to then be able to name it. Because I know those conversations have been hard because I've had to tell you I'm unhappy
Mhm.
with this part of our relationship.
Yeah.
And this is making me really, like, sad, and it's making me feel really depressed, like,
Mhm.
because I feel like you don't find me attractive. I feel like
Mhm.
I'm not doing it for you.
Mhm.
Like, this shit sucks. Like, it sucks to be rejected all the time.
Mhm.
And it may not be all the time, but that's the
That's the
narrative, right?
narrative, yeah.
Like, the narrative in my head is like, it sucks to be in this position where I want you and you don't want me back.
Yeah.
So something needs to change. So, like, that type of conversation to even get to that point, like, this is years of me fucking fumbling through it where I'm fucking telling you, "What the fuck's wrong?" You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, how
that's
come we're
not what you're saying.
that's not what I'm saying, right? But, like, but when I think back about
Yeah, but
the
it
earlier
maybe,
year
like, it feels that way inside. Like,
yeah,
"What the
but
fuck is going on?"
no, but I'm saying, like, even in earlier in our relationship, like, I feel like
Mhm.
that's the way it also manifested, like, in these, like, maybe not having the right words to say it, but trying to say it, but coming out in these, like, I don't know, like, uh I don't know, like, maybe sideway, like, disses, like, to you of, like,
Oh,
"Oh, you just blah, 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 blah." Like "That's why, like, you're rejecting me," or whatever, or, like, that's the way it would came up for me,
okay.
and
Um, like passive aggressive, you mean?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So and that's not to say that this is perfect, but I do feel like in having those conversations, like, there has been some growth, and there's been also, like, when I notice about myself with the discrepancies that I'm more at peace with having the amount of
What's
sex
up,
that we
Hazel
do
Rue?
have. So, like, the amount of sex that we have, like, I'm more at peace with it
Mhm,
now
mhm.
because there's an understanding of, like, when we do get to this point, it's because we are understanding that there is, like, a connection that we're
Mhm.
trying to make,
Yeah.
that we're doing it for this reason, as opposed to I'm just trying to do it because I really need to do it right now,
Yeah.
and not
Or
listening
like
to
or
your
how awful would it be if I'm like, "I just wanna do it because I need you off my back." Like, no,
exactly.
like, I can't imagine. I mean, maybe, but I can't imagine that you would be like, "Yeah, that feels good." Like, that's exactly what I wanted. Me to You to just give it to me because I feel bad. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm,
Yeah. And I think both of us, like, really have the intention of, like, okay, so how can we really work this edge? Um, as opposed to, like, that kind of narrative of, "Hi." That kind of narrative of, like, "Just keep your man happy." Like, that's the narrative that was told to me, which is kind of like where we started. Just keep him satisfied, keep him happy, keeping him make sure that you're keeping him happy, which is just a really flat it's just really flat. It doesn't really speak to anyone's inner experience?
mhm.
Um,
And there's no layers to the go back again to this discrepancy because we all have discrepancies in the way we see this. So,
I'm
like, the
sure, yeah.
so it just being a flat out of, like, just keep them happy doesn't even allow for the complex parts of ourselves with sex to actually come up
Yeah, because
because
then ultimately it's like, if I was just throwing sex at every problem, that could be sustainable maybe for a while, but like we also don't have the opportunity to go grow closer and more intimate in our understanding of what our needs actually are. Because we're not just talking about we've talked about this before. It's not just the physical, you know. Like
yeah,
and it goes beyond physical for me as well. Because it's like, yeah, it is sex and it is physical and it's great, but, like, there's other things that are, like, intrinsically tied to it?
yeah, yeah,
I think, like, the thing that really stands out to me is when Xander and Vanessa talk about, like, it's not just thinking about, is it a no or is it a not yet? And are you open to an invitation to, like, connect? And I'm like, "Oh, shit." Like, that is so wildly different than, like, anything that I've ever, like, engaged with before. So thinking about, like, that engagement piece that you were talking about earlier, like, how do you initiate? Which is, like, so funny because it's always like, yes or no. Like, either I want to or I don't, which is, like, whatever, right? So I don't know, life is so different now than what it was like when I first started having sex. So, like, I'm so busy most of the time that it's more often than not right this second. But that question, like, single-handedly, I feel like, really turned the way I perceive an invitation on its head. Because 'Cause I'm just like, "Oh, it doesn't have to be right this second, I'm gonna jump your bones." But also, like, I can see and then change my mind later if I don't want to, which is, like, such a fun way to think about it. Like, it just opens up so much space to be like, "I don't know, let's see. Am I open?" I
yeah.
mean, maybe it doesn't come across that way to you, but, like,
No, it's just it's not the way it comes across to me. No.
but, just even in, like, thinking about it right now, it feels fun and flirty and open and curious, and I have agency in that,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
as opposed to, like, the way that I was conditioned, it was just like, well, once it gets started, it doesn't stop. So it doesn't
yeah,
stop until the man reaches climax,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's it. So in this, like, there's so much more freedom and nuance and agency. So I really, like, appreciated that
That frame,
perspective.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, like, when I think about that is, like, because I hear that part, right, of, like, "Oh, it's flirty and it's all that," and in it and if I could just take us back to our younger days when you would say no, my response always was, "Imma just turn my back to you."
Yeah, which is so shitty, right?
I
Like,
know, but
"Oh,
that's
so you
but
don't
that's
want
but
so
that's on your end, right?
you don't wanna have sex with me, so you're just gonna turn your so I don't wanna have sex, so then you turn your back." And I'm like, "Cool, cool, that makes me
Yeah,
feel
and, like,
good."
yeah, it's so right, but, like, so then, like, that it closed it off, right? Like, so even in this Xander thing of, like, "Oh, maybe yet," right? Like, I'm having to learn that now at 33 to what that invitation looks like for me. Right, like,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm now until now, I'm starting to get curious because for so many years, it was just like, "No? Okay, Imma just turn the other way." And I remember you saying, like, "That feels really shitty,"
It does feel hella
and then
shitty.
I not having an answer for why that was, like,
Yeah.
why I don't know why I turned my back on you,
Yeah.
to then come find out that I feel really hurt by being rejected,
Mhm.
to be really alone in that experience of, like, "You don't want me."
Yeah.
You don't want me, you don't see me, you don't see that I want you, and you telling me no. So
Mhm.
that hurts, that's painful, so Imma
Yeah.
turn away. But
And
now
then we're just 2 hurt people.
and
We're
now we're
just
2
both
hurt people,
sad.
right?
Yeah.
And so then now, we fast forward to these conversations, right? And then, like, out of this, like, curiosity, I guess you would say that, like, I think you're talking about this invitation, right? I think one of the things that has come up is like, well, maybe we could just cuddle, right? Which is I think is one thing that you're always like, "I would like you to cuddle me." And I come from a family where my mom
Oh
doesn't
my
even
god.
hug me, doesn't fucking give me any
The lack
physical
of
touch,
physical affection.
lack of physical affect. Lady doesn't even look happy to see me. So I'm raised in that environment. So to have somebody say, I want you to cuddle me, like I'm having to work a muscle, but it's an invitation, right? It's
Yeah.
an invitation to engage that muscle. And honestly, like as I'm working that muscle, there is an aspect of me that I'm like, this is interesting to be this close to your body and not wanting to initiate sex
Yeah.
and not want to do it. And it's just to just kind of sit with that and then being like to check in with you like this cool, like this good enough for you. And then I can turn away,
Yeah.
right?
I'm noticing too, and this is not your fault in any way, but I'm realizing just when you said that like there is I think maybe some healing that I'm doing around feeling used. And I think that probably it goes probably deep, like generationally.
Yeah.
And like I have that's not the first time that I have said that to a man. Be like, can we just be here and actually not have sex?
Hmm.
Um, but obviously it's different because you're my husband.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like the sentiment is the same. Like, because in the moment of like turning your back, it did feel really transactional. It's like if I don't give you this, then this. Um, and I think it feels very reassuring to be like, "Hey, do you" like, it feels safe and reassuring to be like, "Hey, can we be physically connected without it having this, like, ulterior or, like, unconscious or implicit motive where you want to have sex?" And I think what happens I mean, maybe I'm working through this like at this moment where I'm like, okay, I think it helps me build trust. And when I have trust, I'm like, cool. Then, like in that regard, like maybe you just don't want sex. And obviously that's true because we have a family, we're married, we built a life together, we have kids. So, like, I know in my brain that that's not true. But, I think in those moments, like, it just feels more, like, true for me or something like that, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Yeah.
Hmm. No, I mean, yeah, I think we could probably start closing it up, you
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
sooner rather than later. But
Okay.
I think
Anyway, or what?
no, not
Just kidding, I'm
anyway. I
just
mean,
kidding.
no, I mean, I'm just, also keeping track of time. I want to be hella long, but I do think it's an interesting conversation. It's a rich conversation just because it is still like like we just said, right? Like still working through it because this experience that you're talking about being used, like was just recently brought up, again. And even me, like feeling like I don't want my partner to feel used. So being
Mm.
intentional about doing that. And then now being on the other end of somebody being skeptical about my own intentions,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
When you're like, I don't believe, like there's a sense of like, I don't know if I could believe you about that.
Mhm.
And then just really trying to be intentional about like, can I actually just be in physical contact with you without wanting to have sex? And I think within that, I feel like there's been some learning about touch for me
Mhm.
and like what it means.
Or, like, jump a few steps.
Yeah, like, because yeah, because there's been
Yeah.
there is like I want to respect your body and I want to be able to like listen to your body and but then also listen to my own body,
Yeah. I
right?
was just thinking about how much tracking it actually takes for you to be like, "Okay, I'm going to" what they would say in somatic experiences, like, uncouple what this behavior and this meaning are. So it's like this touch and this meaning actually don't have to mean this thing, which is sexual touch. Or it could be sexual, but it doesn't have to mean sex. And that same thing is also happening for me. The touch that you're giving me or that we're having doesn't necessarily also need to mean sex. But how slow we actually have to go to cultivate that tracking and awareness is really slow. And then so you're, like, working that edge, and my edge is like, "Okay, cool, so how much do I actually like, how do I wanna engage in this then?" Where I'm really tracking, like, "Okay, what do I want to do next? What am I open to?" And then we're, like, meeting in the middle.
Mhm. Yeah.
But that goes so slow.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're talking about this is, I mean, I think it got brought up, like, what, 2 months ago? I mean, I know you've said it, but I think, like, when it's actually in my mind,
Mhm.
I'm talking about 2 months, 3 months, you know what I'm saying? Of, like,
Yeah, I don't remember, but
having that, like, be brought up to the surface
mhm,
about, like yeah, about this, part about touch and not believing me, right? And, like, being, like, um, guarded, I think, with
mhm,
your body, you know what I'm saying? Like and to try to hold that as much as I can, right?
mhm,
And, like,
mhm,
to try to show you that, like, I'm not always trying to have sex, and I'm having to learn that, right? Of, like, sex touching you, like, it doesn't always have to be that. Like, I
mhm,
can actually just touch you and just try to cuddle you, be in that close proximity
mhm.
without it then leading to something else, and then to then try to convey that to my partner.
And you know what I feel like for me the hottest thing is to hear you be like, "Cool, I'm actually taking your feedback and listening to what you're saying and actually having my own inquiry around it."
Yeah.
Like, that is so sexy.
Thanks. Thanks. Learn, everybody. No.
I
Yeah.
mean, to me, that doesn't mean, like, it's true for everybody else, like, maybe somebody wants to be tossed around, but I feel like, yeah, there's, like, all these physical elements of sex, but ultimately, like, I witness you in your growth, and I'm like, "Fuck, that is why I picked you," you know?
Yeah, I
That is why I
mean,
picked you to spend my life with and raise a family with, because you're gonna work that edge for yourself.
yeah, probably to my detriment though, because I'm always thinking, right? I'm always in my head,
Is it
but
to your detriment, though, or is it to your benefit?
I mean, I think it's to my benefit, but I think sometimes it can be hard
Sure, 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 I
to
got you.
because within that, I feel like sometimes it could be really easy for me to lose track of my own self and my own
Mm,
experience in my own body because I'm so wrapped up in not trying to hurt you
I
and
see
not
what you're
and
saying.
trying to be as
Well,
intentional as I can.
I hope that it feels more intentional of your own experience and less about you trying to please me.
I mean, I feel like I'm more at peace. I was just telling you about a
Mhm.
conversation I had this weekend with some of my friends, and and hearing where they're at in their sex lives and their sex uh
Sexcapades?
sexcapades or like maybe lack thereof, like to hear that and then to be in comparison to me where I'm like, it's crazy because I'm not feeling any of the things you're talking about. Like I
Yeah,
feel
it's just
pretty
like a different
like I
different
feel
experience.
pretty at peace where I'm at right now with my sexual drive, with my sexual like activity. Like I feel cool. Like you know what I'm saying? Like I'm even getting to a point where I'm understanding a little bit more about like why is it that I want to have sex. And when there it does come up, it's like the key word for me is connection and, like, wanting to connect with you.
Mhm.
So, it's just yeah, so it's just different.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody joining and engaging and the comments and we didn't have questions, but I love the commentary. Please keep them coming. We're definitely gonna try to be more consistent. So we love y'all. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you
that's
for
our show for
listening. Make
tonight.
sure you share it with somebody, leave us a
Yes.
rating
Oh yeah.
on Apple Podcasts and
5 stars.
Spotify. Leave us become a
If you
follower on
love us,
podcasts.
share this. Share this with somebody.
Yeah, so
All
thank you
right.
for listening.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.